name is Beck and welcome to a video where I wanted to celebrate Pride Month, and I'm going to be recommending a bunch of books that I've seen bisexuality represented in, so that's what this list is going to entail. Some of these I've read more recently and some of them I've read previously, and so I won't have as much recollection of them, but I will link down below all of the Goodreads links so you can go and check out synopses as well if you want any further information. So without further ado, happy Pride and let's get into these recommendations. The first one on this list I listened to as an audiobook, so I don't have it physically unfortunately, but it is The 7 Husbands of Evelyn Hugo. I always get it confused with a different book title. The 7 Husbands of Evelyn Hugo. This follows Evelyn Hugo, a fictional character, not a real person, but the way that it was written, she felt like she was real and I really wanted to go and Google her after I'd read the book. But she is a bisexual woman in the 80s, I think, and she's a film star, and so she has all of these husbands and she goes through and explains why. But at the moment we are in present day and we are following this reporter who has effectively no name and no career yet. She's only just begun, and she gets a call from Evelyn Hugo's agent in present day when Evelyn Hugo is quite old now and she wants to actually finally tell somebody her entire story. And so this reporter basically gets the story of her life and we go and recount Evelyn Hugo's story, and I loved it so much. I gave it a 4.5 I think out of 5 stars. It's just wonderful, especially to listen to, so I would encourage you to pick it up. If you weren't encouraged by all the hype like a year or two ago on BookTube, you should be encouraged now because it's a great book. Next is a book that I only actually read this year, and I'm so miffed that I didn't get to this earlier, and it's Red, White and Royal Blue by Casey McQuiston, and I adored this. I talked about it recently in a February reading wrap up, so go and check out more of my thoughts there. But this essentially is a male-male love interest story. It has American politics and also the royal family in the UK connected by these two boys who fall for each other, and I just adored it so much. It has got such brilliant chemistry and banter and communication and a wonderful support group of friends as well. So if you're looking for a book that has not just really fleshed out characters but also fleshed out side characters, this is definitely a story that you should pick up because it is excellent. I've heard the audiobook isn't as good, so try and read it physically if you can, but this is just so much fun. And I also adored her other book that has only recently come out, and that is called One Last Stop, and that also has a bisexual protagonist. Both of these do. And so while I adored One Last Stop, this one has been my favourite of McQuiston's books so far, so definitely go and check out their work because they're so much fun and they're so exciting and random and ridiculous, but in a really believable way. I didn't have to suspend my disbelief much at all, so you're gonna really enjoy these. Next is a bit of a deviation because it is an apocalyptic book and it's called The Book of the Unnamed Midwife. The Book of the Unnamed Midwife follows a character who we don't know the name of. Obviously we know that she's a midwife. She is bisexual, so it is from the main character's perspective, and we follow her after this plague has broken out. 99% of the population pass away from the virus that happens in this post-apocalyptic book, and the main character is one of the few women that survive, whereas mostly men do. And so in this world, because she's a midwife and she takes care of people who have children or can have children, she goes around and anybody that she finds that fits this description, she helps them out to make sure that they've got birth control and that they're okay, because it is a very dangerous dominated world and she doesn't want these people to suffer because she's there to help them. So I really love how she runs into different characters and different people, and I found that this book didn't demonize a lot of cultures and people when it really could have, and that's what I really respected about it. If you want more trans representation, there are trans main characters in the second 2 books. I believe they're companions, but they should be read in order, but my favourite personally was the first book, so that is another recommendation. And then after that are 2 more books, but they're by the same author, so Perfect on Paper is one of them. This follows a girl who also is bisexual, so another main character who's bisexual. She is at school and she runs Locker 89, and everybody submits their relationship dramas or qualms to Locker 89. It's all anonymous and she replies to them via email, like burner email, so they don't know it's her. And because her mum is a teacher, it makes it really easy for her to go to the locker after hours, collect all of the letters and then go and reply to them in her own time and keep everything anonymous. But one day when she's collecting the letters, one of the guys is finishing his swim practice and he runs into her and basically blackmails her into helping him. So I really like the banter in here. I like how everything eventuated. The characterization was great and it was just a lot of fun. So again, this is another young adult one that I think would be really beneficial, especially if you're looking for a bisexual protagonist. And then she also wrote another book called Only Mostly Devastated, and that is a Greece retelling. I've got a separate review for that on my channel as well. And that follows a character who is gay, but there is a love interest who is bisexual. And also there are characters in that book who are queer themselves and queer supporting, so it's nice to see a friendship group that has that nature about them too. It's not just this one character on their own who's ostracized by everybody. It's this character who definitely has a solid foundation of support, which is why I loved Only Mostly Devastated. It is a 5 stars for me and this one was a 4, but I still love both and I still recommend both because I really enjoyed both. So they're both young adult. Go and check them out. Now I have a fantasy book, however I know this author is not bisexual himself, so this is not like an own voices story, but when it comes to own voices and bisexual characters, I feel like there is a variation on people's experiences, so some people might relate to this story and some people might not, but it's Nevernight by J. Kristoff, and Mia, the main character, is bisexual, but that's only really touched upon or explored, I guess, in book 2. At the beginning, she's going to this murder school, basically, because she wants to get revenge for the dramas done to her family, and she's going there to learn how to be an assassin so she can exact her revenge. But she finds out she's bisexual. That's just part of the story and part of her character. It's not the driving force of her story by any means, but I know this has been a very divisive book on terms of its subject matter, so it's by all means not for everybody, but arguably all books are pretty subjective anyway, so some people are bound to love something, some people aren't. So if you like Nevernight, then I like Nevernight too. If you don't like Nevernight, that's also fine because we all have different taste. Next is one of my recent favourite books, and I have a separate review for that too, which I will link in the description, and it's The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue by V.E. Schwab. Both characters in here, both Addie and Henry, her kind of love interest or character that she runs into, both of them are bisexual, which is awesome to see not just one character being queer but multiple. And so Addie is a character who we see from in 1700s France and also in present day in New York. So in France, she's in a marriage, or she's about to be promised to a marriage that she doesn't want to be part of. She just wants to be free, and push comes to shove, she effectively makes a deal with the devil, and he also curses her because she won't ever give him her soul because she wanted freedom and he granted her immortality. And so as a caveat to that, he's like, also nobody will remember you even though you're gonna live basically forever. So when Addie is in present day New York, she runs into this guy Henry in a bookstore, and for some reason he remembers her. So that is the general premise of this book. I absolutely adored it. It's one of my favourite books of all time, and V.E. Schwab touches on all of the different romances and relationships that Addie has had through her like 300 years of living, and I adored all of that depth. And it really is careful with the way that things are worded and how identity is formed and how we rely on art and creativity. It's a beautiful book, and it's a standalone too, it's not part of a series. Now next is a book that I haven't read recently, so I can't really say too much about who is bisexual and who isn't, but I do believe there is a queer character in here that potentially has ties to YouTube, and that is Queens of Geek by Jen Wild. This is a fictional story. It is a love story, but it's also a story about anxiety and identity and friendship, and I really like how all of those things coalesce. It says that Charlie likes to stand out. She's a vlogger and actress promoting her movie at SuperCon. And then we've also got Taylor, who likes to blend in and she's very anxious. And then additionally there is another friend of theirs who is a guy, but he's not on the back and I don't remember his name. So there's this trio of friends and they're all going to a convention kind of like Comic-Con, and a bunch of things eventuate. One of them is a female-female romance. One of them is a romance with Taylor and this friend. And I really like how all of these friendships intermingled and how everybody was respectful, and that mental health was really well represented as well. So again, this is another one that is quite short and easy to get through, but is also perfect for Pride Month. Up next is another book that doesn't have the author who is bisexual as far as we know, and that is The Trials of Apollo by Rick Riordan. He wrote the Percy Jackson series, and this is a series that branches off that. So Apollo is a god, and in the past he wronged somebody. Basically Zeus kicked him out of Olympus, and now he's a 16-year-old boy and he has to go on a bunch of quests to restore all of the oracles and exact a balance again in the human world. So he's now a person and he's a teenager that's very awkward and gangly. He has to interact with all of the kids basically and the teenagers at Camp Half-Blood, and they go on quests and stuff, and through that you get a lot of descriptions and some offhanded comments and stuff that are quite well situated about him being attracted to both men and women. And I like that that was just generally included, especially in a middle grade book for kids, because it helps just get used to the idea and create a dialogue about sexuality, and I think that is very well approached and very well done here. And I know that Rick Riordan initially created, or wrote rather, the Percy Jackson books because his son had ADHD and he wanted to write a book series with ADHD represented in it so that his son could actually see himself in fiction. So from all the feedback that he's received from all of his readership, he started to include other things, and that is one of the reasons why I quite enjoy these series. And it's also why I keep going back to Rick Riordan, because he's willing to listen and willing to change and willing to adopt new forms and ask beta readers and sensitivity readers about his input. So I quite enjoyed this series. It was fun, it was ridiculous. The tone of it is quite jovial, so it's very much enjoyable, and it is urban fantasy, so there is magic and gods and monsters and everything and quests, so it's a lot of fun. Do recommend, had a great time. Next up is a graphic novel series that I've come to recently adore, and it is Heartstopper by Alice Oseman. This follows a boy named Charlie, and Charlie is gay, but his love interest is bisexual, and that is Nick. Charlie and Nick go to the same school, and Charlie gets brought into the rugby team kind of against his will, I guess, but him and Nick start to form a friendship, and the taglines for this book are effectively boy meets boy, boy falls in love, boys have a crush, or something like that. They basically get together, it's their romance, and they've got a lot of supportive friends around them. I love that there was a bullying storyline, but it didn't follow the same trajectory as like a tropey storyline would. You get so used to these patterns emerging in high school fiction that it just gets a bit frustrating, but I really appreciate all of the directions and the mental health and the identity discovery that happens in here, and not just in this volume but across the series so far. It's beautiful. I do love it. They're fast to read. Add them to your TBR. I promise you'll enjoy them. Next is another one that I did listen to an audiobook and I also don't have it, but it's A Beautifully Foolish Endeavour and also An Absolutely Remarkable Thing by Hank Green, that duology. These books feature a character named April May, and I believe she is bisexual, a bisexual protagonist. In the second book, we get to hear from another character that was previously introduced in the first book, but we didn't get as much detail on them. In the second book, we get more of a depth to them, which I really liked seeing explored, but that character is also realizing that they are bisexual, and then there is a character, April May, who is bisexual in the first book as well. So this is essentially a first contact with aliens story. I'm sure you've heard about it before. It was particularly popular at a certain point recently on BookTube, and if you've seen me talk about it before, I loved it, so I'm going to talk about it again. But April May runs into this statue at like 3 AM, makes a video about it with her friend, posts it online, goes to sleep, wakes up in the morning, and it's gone viral, and all of these news outlets decide to have a chat with her about it because this statue they have named Carl, and there have been Carls that have popped up in every state across America, and they don't know why. They're alien technology, they've all been isolated so that people can't get close, and April was the first one who found one, who posted about it, and who got close to one. So she's essentially the one who has all the knowledge because everything else has been cordoned off. And so I love how it developed identity, sexuality, friendship, and parasocial relationships. It is worthwhile reading. Hank Green is so clever, and I can't wait to reread that duology. Now, next is a smattering of books that I was talking to a friend about, but I don't specifically remember bisexuality represented in them. I just know that at some point it did happen, but I read them so long ago that I can't give you specifics. So this is where the Goodreads links are going to come in handy. So the first one is A Gentleman's Guide to Vice and Virtue, and this follows a character named Monty, and he is in, I think, 1800s, 1900s. It's when kids or teenagers basically go on a tour when they turn 18, and then they come back home and they have to take over their estate afterwards. It's kind of like a gap year or schoolies for anyone who's in Australia. It's when you get a bit of a break after actually doing all your studies, and it's when you get to have a holiday, and that's essentially what this is. And it follows Monty and his love interest, and then also his sister comes along as well. So it's a great road trip story. Monty's voice is really fun and jovial regardless of what format you pick it up in, and hopefully you can tell me who the bisexual character is. I can't remember if it's Monty or his love interest, and I know his sister is asexual, so there is a bunch of representation thrown in there. I'm almost done with my list. Next up is They Both Die at the End by Adam Silvera. I absolutely bawled my eyes out at this at like 2 o'clock in the morning. I read this in one sitting. It's one of the contemporaries that I'm going to continue recommending, although I know it's not for everybody, but it is for me. So this is a male-male love interest story. I can't remember the characters' names. I think Mateo is one. It follows Mateo and another character. Basically, when you are going to die in this world, you get a text from Deathcast, and you are given 24 hours from that text message, and that's when you die. They just know when you're gonna die, but they don't tell you how. And so we follow Mateo, who gets a text message, and his love interest, who gets a text message. They never met before, and then they kind of have a meet cute and run into each other, and they start to build this relationship together after, you know, 24 hours together. And so it's just heartbreaking and lovely, but so heartbreaking. And I obviously had a very visceral emotional reaction to this. I think I have a blog post review from when I read it ages ago, and I went into this book knowing absolutely nothing and I ended up loving it. And so I don't think you really need to know too much more than that. I think you'll enjoy this if you want to be gutted. So if you want to cry, pick this up. Alright, I only have 3 left now. The next one is Take 3 Girls, and this is an Australian release. We love to see Australian young adult. This is about 3 girls and they all are targeted by this particular website, I think, and then after that they decide that they want to take it down. That's effectively what this follows, girls uniting and having each other's backs. I don't remember which character is bisexual. Apparently one of them was, but when I was talking to a friend, she was like, this one is bisexual, trust me. So I don't remember it very well in that regard, but I remember the 3 characters in here felt very unique and I could tell apart their perspectives when I was reading from them. We've got Addie, Kate and Clem, and all of them are excellent and very different, but they all get along with each other and they don't cut each other down to make themselves feel better, which I love to see. So if you want to pick up a book that has wonderful friendships as well, I think this would be perfect. And then we have Highway Bodies by Alison Evans. Alison is a trans author, so not only does this book have sexual representation of bisexuality, it's also got a whole range of other things as well. It was more of a character focused and relationship building apocalyptic book or post-apocalyptic book than say a fast-paced action apocalyptic book, and I actually quite liked that step back because when I was reading it I felt like I could be in that narrative. I absolutely related to the characters in here. It is multiple perspective. We follow characters in Australia after the apocalypse has happened and there are zombies everywhere and these characters are trying to survive. It sounds like a fairly generic premise, but the way the characters were written and the situations they were specifically in just really nailed it. And so I know that reading an apocalyptic book, especially during a time when we have been in and out of lockdown during a pandemic, might not be beneficial for a lot of people, but if you like that premise and you like queer characters banding together, then I think you'll like Highway Bodies quite a lot. And then the last one on this list is Six of Crows by Leigh Bardugo. I really enjoyed this duology. It is obviously now a show on Netflix, so I'm imagining that a lot of people know about it or know the general premise, but the character that's bisexual is Jesper. He's the sharpshooter, and in the show he was actually given a tryst with a boy really briefly, but his love interest Wylan has not been introduced yet in the show, but in the book he's introduced immediately and he forms part of the crew that are the Crows. So they have changed the show obviously to incorporate the Shadow and Bone trilogy, which happens before that duology does. So if you're still with me, Jesper is the bisexual character. He's absolutely chaotic, which we love. And I don't know if Leigh Bardugo is bisexual herself, but I just love that sexuality is included and identities again are quite trusted with friends and there is a support group there. Even as chaotic as all of the characters in the Six of Crows duology are, they do have a strong friendship together and I really like seeing that as well, so definitely check out the series. But there you go, that is my list. Let me know if you have any more recommendations because as always I would love to hear. So thank you again so much for watching this video. I'll come chat to you down below and I'll see you in my next one. Bye.